going to introduce our first speakers right now that are going to cover what is tribal gaming. And we have Jeremy Tyra from KYPROCK and Oscar Schuyler from the Alabama-Coushatta tribe of Texas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just so you know, too, I've known Jason for a long time, and he still pronounces my last name wrong. It's Schuyler, Jason. So.
Well, Executive Director knows I grew up in West Texas, so we can't pronounce anything. But Oscar Schuyler, right?
Yes. Yeah.
My name is Jeremy Tyra. I'm a partner with KYPROCK Capital, which is an investment advisory firm. KYPROCK Capital focuses a lot on investing in the tribal space. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's a pleasure to join Oscar and talk a little bit about what is tribal gaming. Oscar, if you could tell the audience maybe just a little bit about your background, then I'll tell a little bit how I got into tribal, and we'll just jump right in.
Okay. First, I'd like to say Wasti Chesli, which is it is a good morning in my language. And Yawanko, thank you for this opportunity. Like Jeremy said, I'm an enrolled Oneida tribal member from Oneida, Wisconsin. I've been in the gaming industry now for, oh my gosh, just over 30 years. So I tell her now I say 30 years and 8 grandchildren. So so it's been a while, and all of it in Indian gaming, all on the regulatory side. Started as a young surveillance officer in 1992 to where I am now. As the executive director for the Alabama-Coushatta tribe in Livingston, Texas, which is a Class 2 facility, all Class 2 facility with 850 games. Previously, I was in California at Morongo, where we had 4,800 games, Class 2 and Class 3, and about 120 table games. So it's been a great ride. I enjoy it, and I get to meet people like Jeremy. So
wow. Thank you. It's a pleasure for us to have Oscar today. He's got a lot of experience. He's seen a lot from a lot of different perspectives. And so I'm excited for you to get to hear from him and his perspective, what is tribal gaming. I've been very fortunate to be involved in tribal gaming since 2001. I was studying to go be an investment banker. I was getting ready to move here to New York. And my grandfather had started a company in the 90s that he had taken public, and at that time was very successful, called Multimedia Games. MGAM was kind of one of the early partners and pioneers in tribal gaming, kind of helped the innovation, push the envelope. But more importantly, built a lot of great relationships. And so we got to kind of see, and I was fortunate to get to see tribal gaming from the beginning. And then really that acceleration kind of in the early 2000s. And then one of the things we'll talk about, one of the things my family and I feel very fortunate to do is to get to see what that economic benefit has meant. Tribal gaming is more than just a form of entertainment at a casino on an Indian reservation. It's more than just a revenue source or an opportunity. It's vital. It funds tribal governments, keeps them strong, and produces valuable economic benefits for the tribal people. And Oscar will get to tell more about that. So I'm very humbled to be here today and to get to talk about this. I've gotten to watch a lot of great people do a lot of great things. And one thing I know about tribal gaming, I was taught early on, tribal gaming is to each tribe what it needs to be at that time. Tribal government is leading their people, and so some tribes may need to push harder, some tribes may need to be more conservative, and those things change over time, just like leaders and people's needs. And so I think this industry is a fabulous, fabulous thing. So I'll get off my soapbox and we'll kind of get started. So what is tribal gaming? It's big and growing. It's vital. And it is strong. Big, right? So we talked about 1980. You grew up on the Oneida Reservation. That's right, in Wisconsin. So the tribe was some of the early people that started to use bingo games to raise money for the tribes, right? And this is in the late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, from 76, I believe it was, to the early 80s, we had a big bingo operation. And any of you that are familiar with Chairman Stevens probably heard him tell the story that he used to get mad because he would play basketball in our rec center, and he would get kicked out because they'd have to set up tables for bingo. So that's true story. As a young kid, at like probably in my early teens, we used to get $20 to go and pick up all the paper from all the tables. So me, my brothers, my sisters, we would clean bingo tables for $20. And from there it just grew. The economic impact. We went from a small bingo operation to a full-blown casino that we built in 1994.
So for those of you that don't know, some of you will know, some may be too young. They used to play bingo on paper, and they still do in a lot of places in the world. And it was a way that the tribes could raise money, but yet they still had to have partners to supply the paper and the supplies.
Yep.
And I know of a group that's Oklahoma-based that still is probably one of the largest suppliers of equipment and capital to any casino market anywhere in the world. They happen to be to tribal gaming. They supply thousands of machines and have provided billions of dollars of financing. And the relationship started because they'd built relationships in tribal country and took pull tabs and bingo paper on credit to tribes, believing that they could raise money, pay the bills, and built some great relationships.
Huge. From where back then to, like I said, and a lot of places have the same story. A lot of the tribes have the same story where they starting a bingo, either like a gymnasium, and then they bring in, when Class 3 gaming was introduced, then they kind of converted their bingo hall into a gaming facility with machines. So a lot of tribes had facilities that weren't built for gaming, but they made do at the time because the economic impact was so significant that they had basically had to, make hay while the sun was shining. So, and thankfully today it's still shining.
We'll do the fast forward button on about 40 years of legal history here, if we can, because Oscar and I have both done week-long sessions just on Class 2 gaming, much less some of the history. There's a lot there, all of it very important. But out of these efforts in the late 70s, some tribes started to conduct higher stakes bingo games, the Seminole tribe, some tribes in California. And this, of course, started to get on the radar of other commercial interests who didn't necessarily like this or feel that this was right. So this got challenged in the courts. And this worked its way up. And one of the big cases, which Morongo was a big supporter of, was the Cabazon case. And the Cabazon case, basically, let's talk about what it did, necessarily what it was. What it did is it brought a bunch of legislatures, politicians to the table and said, we better put a stop to this or put some controls around this, or the tribal gaming will take off. Because of tribal sovereignty, because the tribes can conduct this activity, we need some regulation. So fast forward some further, kind of from 1980 until 1987, 1988, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act gets passed by the U.S. Congress, puts framework in. And I want to read this because this is the exact language, and I do think it's an important language. The stated purpose of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act is to promote tribal economic development, tribal self-sufficiency, and strong tribal governments. Yep. And the reality is that it was a piece of legislation that was intended to restrict tribal gaming and force them to have to negotiate with the states in which their tribal lands were located.
Well, and some tribes too, actually, they feel that the IGRA is an infringement on their sovereignty. So, it kind of depends on who you're talking to. So, although it had a great economic impact, but it also infringed on sovereignty too. So,
and so sovereignty is a word we're going to come back to, and we'll talk about a lot. It's an important word because it kind of really dictates the next chapter of tribal gaming. Once this piece of legislation got put in place, and as we say, it was really a restriction. There were some states and tribes that had very good relationships and were able to come together and reach an agreement, government-to-government agreement, called a compact.
Yep.
And in this agreement, they would agree to the terms that typically would involve some sort of revenue sharing, couldn't call it a tax. In some states like Minnesota, I believe, there is none. There was a good relationship. It's a perpetual contract that says the tribes have the exclusive right to do this activity, and they don't pay anything to the state. There is some state oversight. I do believe they help fund some of that regulation.
Yep.
But out of IGRA, there was also a classification. So any game that wasn't a facsimile of a slot machine, that was a bingo-based game, which was called a Class 2 game, which you've heard the executive director mention, could be conducted without state oversight, without a compact, and the tribe is the sole regulator of that
Yep.
game. And out of that's where companies like Multimedia Games, like my grandfather's, provided services and products that sought to apply technology, if you will, to that regulation change, and found tribal partners that were willing to go put that out there, that you had a bingo-based game that played, yet looked like a slot machine, but met this definition. And so throughout the course of the 90s and into the early 2000s, we saw that battle play itself out. And, of course, the tribes ultimately prevailed, as they did in most, I guess, all of these cases.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
But out of that brought a lot of state governments to the table. I heard the analogy told to me a long time ago. It was kind of like Saudi Arabia finding out that they had oil. And the next thing you know, they're invited to the United Nations. They hadn't been for a long, long, long time, hundreds and hundreds and thousands, of years.
Yes.
But Class 2 was kind of that thing for certain tribes in certain places that brought them to the table to negotiate compacts.
yeah. And it wasn't only with that though. I mean, I look at my tribe. Growing up really in a poverty-stricken reservation, prior to gaming, our local municipalities wouldn't offer any help to my tribe. The tribe would seek help for whether it be housing, whether it be sewer, whether it be water. Those municipalities would not help our tribe. All of a sudden we build this big casino, and now we got money. Now they want to help us, but they don't want to only help us, but they got their hand out. So it changes everything. I mean, along with the good comes the bad. So, and we got, you go to oversight of regulation, most tribes have three layers of regulation that they have to adhere to. Privatized gaming has one. We're probably the most regulated gaming industry around. So,
yeah, I think that's certainly been our experience. The tribes have had to fight for everything. That was before we got to tribal gaming. But certainly, in my experience, I've seen that through tribal gaming. So we kind of take that first 20 years of history, and we start basically no casinos, no gaming revenue. We fast forward, let's just go ahead to today. We've got over 500 casino physical locations, over 200 gaming tribes producing over $41 billion at GGR.
Yep.
Quite a growth over a 40-year trajectory. And the reality is most of that revenue generation took place from 2004, 2006 until 2018. And so pretty big, rapid growth through that stretch for tribal gaming. And out of that come a lot of things that tribal gaming is today and will be. But before we kind of talk a little more about that, I want to come back to this part about being critical, right? So you talked about growing up on the reservation and not having services. It's one of the things that I've been fortunate to get to see in across dozens and dozens and dozens of tribes in my life, and to get to know tribal leaders who've used tribal gaming to create economic engines that don't just stop with taking money out of a slot machine and handing it to somebody. It's investing in healthcare and in education. So, Oscar, maybe if you could just give the audience from your perspective a little bit about kind of what that's meant to you, your family, and to some of those that you've known, just to kind of put a little personal touch on something like that.
Yeah, when I was first asked to do this, they said, well, what is Indian gaming? So for me, my first thought was, oh man, it's education, it's jobs for our people, it's healthcare, it's more than just money. My tribe offers all kinds of services for our membership, along with the other tribes. It's not just per cap, like what everybody hears about. These tribes are making all this money, they're getting per cap payments. That's not the case with all tribes. All tribes don't get that. I can go back to school and I'm offered through my education, to our education department, I can get $20,000 a year. My kids get $20,000 a year to go to school. Alabama-Coushatta, they have an education department that's set up that it's paid for as long as they're going back and they're getting passing grades. And that's all over any country. That's not just, I say my tribe because I'm more familiar with it. My tribe also passed a resolution back in the 90s that any supervisory position in our gaming has to be an enrolled Oneida tribal member. So you go to Oneida Casino in Wisconsin, you'll see that supervisors all the way up to general managers and an enrolled Oneida tribal member. So it's the economic impact for our people is great. And that's what it's for. You say, what is Indian gaming? Indian gaming is for our members. It's jobs, it's security. It's given our membership opportunity to buy homes, to buy new vehicles, and to be comfortable. To go and get health care and not have to worry about, either a co-payment or a big bill that they're stuck with. So we don't have one individual within the tribe that's just making a ton of money.
So that's phenomenal, and I know we get to hear stories like this all over, right?
Yeah.
It's changed lives, changed generations, right? And I think that's important for people to understand, whether you're making an investment, whether you're writing about the industry, whether you're supplying a product, selling a service, right? It is big, right? And it is growing, right? But it is critical, right? It is a vital thing. And so the leaders and the people that are responsible for the P&L or the Gaming Commission, right, they take their jobs very serious, right? Not to say that you might not find someone in a commercial casino that takes their job very serious, but it does attach a bigger meaning. And I think that's pretty universal. I found tribes have really used gaming and kind of to promote their identity and who they are and tell people. And so it's an important thing that people will fight for, not just because it produces dollars, because they have the right to do this or the license, but because the life that it provides for people, right?
Oh yeah, and now too, we have lobbyists. That's huge. Tribes have lobbyists. Back in the 70s, that they didn't have that. They had usually the chairman or the vice chairman, acting as dual roles and making those visits to DC. Now, tribes can actually pay lobbyists to get their best interests, from the government.
So let's talk. That's great. So let's talk about this last part of our session. Let's talk a little bit. We've kind of breezed over, like I said, like 40 years, but states, tribes, sovereign governments enter into an agreement. The state can't just receive something without benefit. In a lot of cases, tribes have received exclusivity. So there is a lot of power in the contract itself. But let's move beyond just the legal part. Let's talk about this thing that's been built. There is an expertise, right? Yep. Tribal gaming is strong, right? So yes. It is big and growing. It's vital. It's critical. But it is strong, right? So we talked about sovereignty. As a tribal member, someone been around tribal gaming, can you just talk about sovereignty for just a second to people here? Because I think some people really don't understand. I know for a long time I didn't understand sovereignty to a tribal person.
Well, simplest is just a government within a government. The tribes see ourselves as a government. So we're looking for that government-to-government relationship, whether it's with the state or whether it's with the president. That's where we see ourselves. We see it as a government, and that's the easiest, best way to describe it. And as a tribal member, we get, there's a lot of rights, I guess, that we have that we get. Whether it's hunting, fishing, gaming. That's what we do. My family's a big time. We hunt. My family doesn't buy beef unless they want it. We literally live off venison. During the winter. So yeah.
It really is. It's that core recognition, right? The Native people were here, and it is that respect and acknowledgement.
Yes.
And it is something that I've seen tribal leaders use tribal gaming to fight for, to protect, because it's more than, as you said, just your gaming rights. It's that recognition, right? That core respect. We talked about the expertise. So beyond just what's right and the way things should be, and seeing that great growth, there's opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about the expertise these last few minutes. You've spent, as you say, 2 decades, or 3. Okay, I was going to say just 2. All right, we're going to be a little younger, Oscar. There's a lot of expertise built up across Indian country. Great operators, great brands, great patron loyalty, great expertise.
Well, what I've noticed over the last probably 10 to 15 years is tribes are really getting asked to present more. We used to go to these conferences and we wouldn't see Indian people talking about Indian gaming. We're coming now. Now we actually have Indians talking about our industry, protecting our assets, and watching out for our people. That's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen over the last 15 years. Yeah. So we got, from industry experts. You look around this room, you got, I see Val sitting in the back. We got Francis is here, representing TGPN, Dave Iapondo, so, they're, tribal people representing tribal, the tribal industry, and like I said, it wasn't happening 15 years ago. It just wasn't, they weren't tapping our resources and our professionals to talk about it.
Well, we've certainly seen it manifest itself in the expansion arena, right? The capital markets have backed it. We've seen Porch Creek go and to Pennsylvania, take a commercial license, buy a multi-billion-dollar property from Sands, right?
Yeah.
We've seen Seminole come to Las Vegas, right? We've seen San Manuel very successfully execute a plan, right? So not only are they protecting the assets, right, but tribal gaming is growing.
Yeah.
They are certainly, you talk about strong governments. I think we'll hear more about it here, and we've heard about it for years. Ask anybody that doesn't think tribal governments are strong governments, just go to California and look at the money that they spent there, right?
Oh, yeah.
So tribal gaming will be the future too, right? It is very much kind of where we're going. It is not going anywhere.
Well, you look at, is there anybody in here from FanDuel by chance? Okay. So you look at California, they're looking at, gaming. They're looking at expanding. They're doing, 2 years ago, and FanDuel went pretty much against your FanDuel. Oh, sorry. Sorry. But that's the best example I know. And because I was in California when all this started happening. So, so they kind of went up against the tribes, I think, inadvertently and lost. They didn't think the tribes were as powerful as they were. FanDuel's big, but they found out that the tribes are just as big and had just as much money as them. And now what they were trying to do is off the table now. FanDuel is coming back to the tribe saying, hey, we effed up. How do we make this right? So now, again, I apologize to FanDuel, but, but now they're going, they're making their way to all the conferences, to make that right, and try to correct what they did wrong. And they're trying to bring on some people to do that.
Yeah, Oscar, I think that's good. And as we wind that down, kind of tying into our next session about collaborating with tribes. It's been my experience, and I'm pretty biased, obviously. But as an observer, as an investor, I have seen the tribes be the best partners of any business venture I've ever been involved in. The tribes are very loyal, very collaborative, very much great partners. But they very much have a long-term vision, right? 7 generations in a lot of cases,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
And so they're not going to just take the first thing that rushes into the door, right? They're going to be very methodical. They're going to make good decisions for their people. And look, as an industry observer, I don't have any stock in FanDuel or any say in the matter. I think they've done a good job. They've gone out and hired Chairman Simmermeyer, right, from recently. They're making investments into tribal country, right? And we talked about IGT before. There was a time when IGT fought against tribes. IGT then invested, and people like Knut Knutson spent their life investing with tribes and built great relationships. And IGT has a great relationship with tribes, right? And it can change, and I think that's the part, right? It's a big growing industry, and people can make mistakes, but they are collaborative.
Yeah, IGT recovered from that. They had Sodak. So right. I don't know if anybody remembers those days, but Sodak was largely Indian gaming, and they got rid of it, and tribes weren't happy. I was getting used to the everything finally, Oscar, and now we got to go to IGT again. So it took a while, but they got over it, and that's the same, and tribes can be loyal. Sometimes loyal to the tune of millions in dollars in revenue because they go with a company that came to them and helped them start when nobody else would help them, but this one company, and they helped them, and you do something like ATM and check cashing. This is a true story. They said no. They said, we're not going to move. They helped us when we were here at the beginning. And the sales guy said, we can save you roughly $10 million. They said, nope. They said, nope, we're staying with this company because they were here from day one and they helped us. Their exact words were, they helped us when nobody else would. So.
Well, I think we saw that loyalty. We got to wrap here, but I'll end with a story some know. When I was first kind of learning the business, it was a fascinating time. I think that first year, MGAM was the fastest growing company on the NASDAQ. There was just talented people everywhere. And I remember going into a room and I said, okay, so tell me about making games, these games we sell. I kept asking. My grandfather pulled me aside and he said, after the meeting, he said, we don't know anything about making games. And I said, well, we sell games. And he said, right now we put out parking meters and make $300 a day. He said, you build relationships, take care of these people, we'll figure out the games part. And that was what we saw, right? That was that collaboration. There's a lot of talented people, and they gave them the time to figure it out and make a good return on that investment. So I would end with just saying, if you're not working with tribes, get started. It'll be the best decision you ever made.
Yep.
Thanks, Oscar.
Thank you.